The list of people who believe that Donald Trump is not going to relinquish control of the White House peacefully if he loses the 2020 election is growing. And it includes at least one Republican candidate now who happens to be running against Donald Trump. His name's William Weld. He is a former governor here in Massachusetts. He previously was running as a libertarian. He now is a Republican. And he says that Donald Trump will not leave voluntarily if he loses the 2020 election. From Real Time with Bill Maher asked, if Trump loses, do you think he'll leave? And William Weld said, not voluntarily. He'll have a run at saying it was a rigged game, so I'm not leaving. I don't think the military, and indeed even the Justice Department, the rank and file, the investigative agencies, would stand for that in this country. I like that William Weld added that last piece because it's important for us on the left, and not that William Weld is on the left, but for anyone on the left who is even entertaining this idea of what would Trump do? Would he try to hold on to control if he lost the 2020 election? We're not like the crazy right with the birther stuff and the Obama's going to cancel the 2016 election stuff, which is why I think it's important to point out that William Weld is not saying Trump would succeed at staying in the White House, even if he lost the 2020 election. He might try to pull it or try to delay it, but ultimately the centers of power in the country wouldn't allow it. And I also think that that's the most likely scenario. And every single time that this comes up, I go out of my way not to be hyperbolic, because with Obama, there was so much nonsense about Obama won't leave. Obama will cancel the 2016 election and declare himself indefinite president, or Obama will declare martial law as a justification for remaining president beyond his 8 years. We want to be as sober and realistic as possible about this. With Barack Obama, there was no indication whatsoever that Barack Obama had those sort of anti-democratic authoritarian tendencies with regard to the presidency and trying to not relinquish power. There was nothing Obama said which suggested that he might, out of his own concoction, not accept the results of an election. So when the right said Obama won't leave, it was 110% BS. With Trump, it's not 110% BS. It's still not likely that it would happen, though, right? Trump has all the way back to 2016 in the debates said maybe he would accept the election results, maybe he wouldn't if they showed that he lost, depending on what he thinks about the election results. Trump has said president for life, like what China made possible recently, is interesting, and maybe we would try it sometime. Trump has said years ahead of the 2020 election, 2 years ahead, that the only way Democrats can defeat him in 2020 is via fraud. That is yet another one of these sort of pretexts to the idea that he might not accept the election results. Trump has lied about the validity of past elections. Remember, he claimed 3 to 5 million people voted illegally in 2016 for Hillary Clinton, and that in reality, if you account for those 3 to 5 million alleged illegal votes, he won the popular vote as well as the electoral vote. Trump has made clear that he has a degree of narcissism that might make him unable emotionally to accept defeat. So when people talk about Trump won't leave the White House peacefully if he loses, is it more likely that he would try to retain power than would someone like Barack Obama? Obviously, the answer is yes. Is it likely Trump would succeed if he tried at not relinquishing the White House? I don't think it's very likely. So what we need to do is let's just work on voting him out rather than focusing on whether or not he would leave. Let's work on preventing voter suppression and manipulation tactics to actually hand Donald Trump the victory, because much more likely than Trump loses and somehow stays in the White House is that the combination of voter ID laws and election machine tampering and foreign influence and reductions in voting hours and closures of polling places all together push Donald Trump into victory. That's what we need to most proactively be working to prevent. I agree with William Weld that if Trump tries not to give up control of the White House, that the forces of power, I know that the Justice Department's in the tank for him. I know all of that stuff, but I think that that would even be too far. I think that he would ultimately be removed. And there's a really big problem in American culture today, American political culture today, that this relates to. Expectations. Expectations aren't being managed properly. So take impeachment, for example, which we'll talk about. The expectation shouldn't be, can we remove Trump via impeachment by the 2020 election? Because that's not happening. The expectation should be, can impeachment proceedings expose the content of the Mueller report enough to damage Trump to make sure that he loses the 2020 election? We have to manage our expectations. And similarly, if Trump loses the 2020 election and tries to stay in power, could he actually do it? I believe William Weld is right, and the answer is no, that he would be removed. But he might try to argue that the election was bogus, that it was rigged, that it was fraudulent, whatever, because he's done it before in an election he won, but who knows what he would do in an election that he loses. Last thing on this, the idea that the reason Trump would be so adamant about not losing has been floated as maybe being the statute of limitations on obstruction. There's this idea that Trump, it's not so much that he wants to be president for another 4 years, although his ego would take a hit if he were to lose, but it's the idea that if he is not president for another 4 years, he could end up indicted for obstruction because the statute of limitations would not have expired. There is a way around that, which would be if Trump loses the 2020 election, 3 days before the inauguration of the next president, Trump resigns, Mike Pence becomes president and issues a preemptive pardon for Donald Trump. It might work, it might not. The legal experts have sort of different views on that, but there is a path, even if Trump loses in 2020, to protecting himself from indictment on obstruction after he's gone. Just something to keep in mind.